this rearranging is happening, I'm going to do introductions. Dave Clausen, who is right here, he is a veterinarian and lifelong conservation advocate. His professional career includes 25 years as a large animal veterinarian with an emphasis on herd health and reproductive medicine. He was appointed to the Natural Resources Board in 2005 and remained on the board until his term expired in 2013, 4 years of which he served as the chairman of the Natural Resources Board. Randy Jurewicz, who is to my left, he received both his bachelor's and master's degrees from the Department of Wildlife Ecology, University of Wisconsin-Madison. He started working for the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources in 1979, and he spent his entire career working on endangered species management for the state of Wisconsin. As you heard earlier today from Lisa, Randy was the major author of the Wisconsin Administrative Rules governing the Wolf Damage Payment Program. Since his retirement in 2011, Randy has remained active by being on the Wisconsin DNR Wolf Advisory Committee and the Timber Wolf Alliance Board. And also to my left here is Jayne Belsky, who is a lifelong Wisconsin resident. I have here, she and her husband Mike have lived in rural central Wisconsin for the past 35 years with wolves as good neighbors since 1995. Jayne was a volunteer wolf tracker for the state and volunteered at the Necedah Refuge, helping to monitor and herd their wolves for over 15 years. And Jayne is certainly an expert on tracking issues and a number of other issues related to hound hunting. And then my own bio is in the program itself. So we can sit down here, and as we had organized this beforehand, we're going to have Dave Clausen go first, and then we're going to have, I think it's going to be Randy, and then Jayne, and I'll be the grand finale.
Thank you. This is going to be brief. At this time of the day, I'm more interested in hearing your questions than you are about hearing my background. Jodi explained a little bit of what I've been doing for the last 31 years of my life. I guess there's two things I'd like to start out with. One is that, although I am on the board of directors of the Timber Wolf Alliance, technically I'm not here representing them. And then the second thing is that my bio that is in the brochure here, although I really like what it says, my apologies to Jeff, I'm not working on black bears. I do care about them. I guess if I could just amend that to say that his goals are dispelling the myths and misconceptions that have led to the widespread unnecessary persecution of wolves, reducing human-wolf conflict through education would fit, but evidently there's just kind of a page error there. So that part belongs to Jeff, not to Randy. As Jodi mentioned, I've been with the Wisconsin Wolf Management Program for a long time. I think one of the interns said, "Oh, there's Jurassic Jurewicz coming in the door," regarding how long I've been with the wolf program. In the 1970s, I wrote a grant that eventually hired Dick Thiel, the first DNR wolf biologist. Worked with Dick in the 80s to develop the first wolf recovery plan. This is the first statewide wolf recovery plan in the nation. We kind of traded in Dick Thiel for Adrian Weideven, hired Adrian in the 90s and worked with him in the developing of the famous, bordering on infamous, 1999 Wolf Management Plan, Wisconsin Wolf Management Plan. And it was a great plan at the time, and it worked tremendously. As Adrian said, it's out of date, needs to be replaced, 350, you know. I just hope I don't die before we revise the 350. That's the one thing remaining in my life that I want to do, is to revise the 350 goal of wolves in the state of Wisconsin. During my tenure, I did develop the rules for the payment program that Lisa talked about this morning. I guess it was over $1 million worth of payments that I was responsible for making. Now, what that did for me is just give me the opportunity to review hundreds and hundreds of claims, hundreds of necropsy reports, hundreds of letters from people asking for money, pleading for money, hundreds of letters from the children of the people asking for money. It got so I had a little checklist next to my desk of the word beloved. How many times would the letter contain the word beloved when it referred to paying for a hound dog? This one letter was so many, I thought the dog's first name was Beloved by the time I got through with it. Some of those letters were just out and out made me cry. Some of the pet letters especially. None of the hound dog letters made me cry. Simply because, you know, they're tools. You can tell me that this is a beloved dog and a beloved dog and a beloved dog. But if you send your dog after bears, how much do you really love it? I mean, you can like it a lot, you know. I've got tools in my toolbox that I inherited from my grandfather, and I am really attached to those tools. They, one might say, beloved tools to me. But if I'm working on my boat and I drop it into the lake, well, okay, it's another tool that I just lost. And so reviewing those claims gave me an opportunity to really see what people were losing at the expense of having 400, 500, 600, 700, 800 wolves in the state of Wisconsin. What was the cost of having that many wolves in the state? Some of these individual claims, again, the pet situation, most of all, is very tough. Cattle, perhaps secondary. Hound dogs, we thought we were going to get rid of it when the wolves became a hunted species, but the bear hunters kind of beat us to the punch with writing their own law and perpetuating the hound dog payment program. I guess one of the things that's been the most fun in the last couple of years is being on the expert team of the lawsuit against the use of dogs in wolf hunting. The attorneys of Jodi, and Jodi Limited, Habush, and Ratier, and HS Law asked me to testify in the lawsuit and essentially document my experience with paying for 192 hound dogs killed by wolves. So it isn't a once-in-a-while thing. It isn't an accidental thing. I paid for 192 dead hound dogs and another 40 hound dogs that were just injured by wolves over the years. And by doing so, I gained a certain perspective and information about the payment program. Now, was it successful? Yes, I think it was very successful, and the number of wolves that we have in the state is kind of a result of that. So I'm here to answer your questions, and I will turn the mic over to.
How are we doing with the let's just go this way.
Going this way. Okay. Fine. Thank you. I'll be here all week.
I'll just have a short thing to read here. Training hounds with live bait animals. Wisconsin is one of about 20 states that still allows the use of live animals as bait to train hunting hounds in a captive situation. In 2003, there was an amendment made to the captive wildlife training laws, and now they can use rabbits, raccoons, fox, coyotes, bobcats, and bears. On the DNR website, it promotes dog training. And it says, dog training has deep roots in hunting and conservation culture. In order to develop dogs that can reliably hunt and recover game, it is vital to train on a variety of game under a variety of conditions. It's important to note that the game used for training hounds actually means living, breathing animals. These wild game animals are, for the most part, exempt from animal cruelty law. There's also a training season carried out on wild animals in the field, an unregulated 24/7 year-round training season is open to training coyote hounds. And until wolves were relisted as endangered, the training season for wolf hunting hounds was the same, with the exception they had to train during daylight hours, no nighttime running. There's also a special training season for bear hounds, where packs of hounds are run on bear, and this goes on 24 hours a day in the heat of the summer from July 1st to August 31st. And many of these bears have their cubs, which have been habituated to bait piles, so the hounders have a starting point. The bear hounders fondly call this their run for fun. During the training season, bears are often chased to exhaustion for 7 to 10 hours. Hound hunting and hound training is an out of sight, out of mind kind of thing. Many believe it's all part of a harmless traditional hunting. But when the state condones the use of live bait animals to train hunting hounds, it devalues the lives of those animals. The thin line between hunting and animal fighting is easily blurred. Hounds are bred for their fighting abilities. Wild animals are trapped and sold to become bait for hounds to train on. All this has a familiar ring to it. I wouldn't call this conservation culture. It's a culture that stayed in the dark too long. I have a short video that I hope starts a conversation that I think is long overdue in this state.
Okay, as Jodi said, I am a veterinarian. I'm also a hunter, and just to let you know where I stand, I don't euphemistically take, harvest, or manage animals. I kill them, give a little thanks, and then I take them home and eat them. As a veterinarian in northern Wisconsin, I've had a fair opportunity to see what happens in the interaction between dogs and bears. And this little fellow is Linus. And Linus is not your typical bear dog, but he did make the mistake one night of rushing outside to scare a bear away from his owner's bird feeder. And being a Westie, he was brave enough that he ran up and he bit the bear right in the front foot. And the bear slapped him one time. And this is Linus looking rather sad. And I would say that oftentimes when you're discussing hound hunting, the participants will tell you how much the dogs live for this and enjoy it. I have never seen one laying on my table gasping for breath with 2 or 3 broken ribs and his chest blown up with air like a balloon that crackles when you touch it, or his stomach ripped open. Bears have a unique ability to, when they swat, they may make only a little entry hole, but Linus actually had his abdominal wall was ripped open from his ribs all the way back to his groin, and all of his intestines were out underneath his skin. And this is after we patched him up the first time. Unfortunately, there was so much damage that that skin debrided, and in about a week he had to undergo a second surgery, and we actually changed the direction of the hole. This is him about a week after that. There's still a drain in there to take the fluid that was accumulating in there out of there. And you can see by the cuts and scrapes and stuff, that was one swat from that bear. And you can, what I have seen, this is probably mild compared to a lot of the stuff that I've seen on hounds. And you can talk to any veterinarian in bear country, and they'll tell you, if they're honest with you, they'll tell you just exactly what does go on. So Linus did have a fairly happy ending, and he looks a lot happier there. If I had two nice-looking ladies like that holding me, I'd be smiling too. But I just wanted to give you some idea of what goes on and what happens to these dogs. There's also the thing about what the dogs do to the bears. And Jayne talked about this a little bit, and I can give you some anecdotal evidence here. She talked about running the bears to exhaustion. When you can keep switching out dogs and run a heavy bear for hours in temperatures that are approaching 100 degrees, there is heat exhaustion and there is death from that. And the popular view of this is that when the dogs come, mama sends the cubs up a tree, and they wait up there for her to come back to them. That's not always true. Quite often those cubs will try to follow mama, and I have a friend that saw one day, saw the sow. He was out walking his dogs, and he saw the sow run across the road, and about 50 yards behind came this little cub, just struggling to keep up, and not far beyond that were the hounds. And when those hounds catch those cubs, it's curtains for the cubs. So my anecdotal evidence here is a couple of years ago, my wife and I went up to our cabin in June, and here was a sow with 4 cubs in the yard. And those bears visited most all the cabins around the lake, tearing down bird feeders and whatever, and everybody had videos of them that we posted on our lake website. And the last day we saw that sow and those 4 cubs was the 1st of July, which was the opening of the bear running season. That bear, or those 4 cubs, never came back. Now, I would be honest enough to say that I've got city grandchildren, and the boys get a big, they think it's a big deal to go out and pee in the yard at night. And I have to admit that I wasn't really happy about having the bear and those cubs around there for the fear that they would walk out some night, get in between the bear and her cubs. And so, while I wasn't entirely sad to see the bear go, the thought of how that may have happened really did not make me too happy. So, as a veterinarian, I always, I won't say enjoy, I enjoyed the challenge, the technical challenge of putting these dogs back together, because I like trauma surgery and that type of thing. But I never stopped questioning why I had to do that. And one day I got fed up enough with it and read the humane statutes, and then I called up Dr. Belay, who was the state humane veterinarian, and I said, this clearly fits the definition of animal fighting. Why do we allow it? And she said, that's because it's hunting, and kind of end the conversation. Well, that kind of stayed true until the Coonsey case, when the judge did say that animal cruelty laws also apply to hunters. So we know that there are violations of the animal humane laws, but it's really tough to gather evidence on it. In the northern part of the state, it's even tougher to find somebody that will be an arresting officer, and it's tough to find a DA that's going to prosecute it. So that may someday be a solution, but as of right now, I'm not holding a lot of hope for that. There's also been some political efforts. I talked to a Forest Service biologist, and I had read about constituents in New York and some of the other populated states that had put pressure on their elected representatives saying, hey, we're paying for those national forests. How come you're allowing this hounding to go on in these forests? And there actually, I believe, according to the biologist, was legislation introduced. At the last minute, the NRA came in and took this up as a cause and said that Congress was trying to limit hunting opportunities. So, and it was defeated. So that didn't work, although I think that's still an avenue, because talking to biologists in the National Forest, they have more trouble with trespass and people driving around barriers and that type of thing, and when they put up cameras, it's generally bear hunters. Another thing that I didn't talk about was all of that bait that goes out. They can start baiting early, fairly early in the spring, and it's French fry, used French fry grease from restaurants, it's donuts, it's cookie dough, it's all kinds of stuff. Tremendous amount of calories. And one of the things that we're doing with all those calories we're putting into the bear is that instead of a bear having 1 or 2 cubs, we're now having litters. And so we're exacerbating our bear problems because we're getting more and more bears. So, and there's probably also some long-term metabolic issues from having that high a carbohydrate diet. Bears are not far from people when it comes to those kind of issues. So what I would say is that this is something whose time has expired, and that as you need to go forward, I think this is an issue that you can gain some traction on. However, I would caution just a little bit, because this is a issue that you will accomplish something a lot faster if you have the cooperation of what I would call mainstream or ethical or thinking hunters anyway. And if you approach this as being against all hunting, you're probably going to fail, because about 80 or 85% of the people in the state of Wisconsin approve of hunting. And if this can be painted as an attack against all hunting, you're going to have a tough time making progress. So I think Dr. Simon was right today to have some type of a pro-hunting statement, and started out with that. So that's about all I have for now.
Thank you very much. This particular issue of hound hunting, I think, is just a really interesting case study. It's a microcosm of a lot of the issues that we've been talking about all day today and will continue to talk about tomorrow. It raises ethical issues and good sportsman values issues. It focuses on the importance of science-based or best available information to inform policies. And it really goes to a big way the concerns with democracy and who is making the policies that inform our state's wildlife concerns. So what I was glad that you heard a bit today, and we'll hear more from when we see Jayne's video as well, but hound hunting comes with it with a very mixed bag, to say the least. And it raises ethical issues in terms of the concepts that Dave was talking about for animal cruelty, both to the dogs who are put in harm's way knowingly by their owners, as well as, of course, the animals who are being pursued. And then there's the captive wildlife issue, which I've heard about. I'm actually not looking forward to seeing Jayne's video. We all can imagine, without even seeing it, what would be involved with training on wild caged animals to train dogs to pursue them. And we know from Randy's explanation that dogs and wolves and bear get into they get into confrontations with one another. So that's where we're at. What I would like to focus on, though, is to attempt to frame a legal context for this. What about hound hunting can be regulated, can be restricted or limited in conformance with science and with ethical concerns and with democratic values? So how can we go about it? And I promise you it's not going to be easy. So with that, I wanted to get a feel first to explain to you how many folks are even involved with hound hunting. I looked at the statistics. Close to 1 million hunters, that's deer hunters and bird hunters, participated in 2011 and 12 season. Of that, close to 1 million, we're talking about hundreds of thousands of other hunters. There sounds like there's just several thousand bear hunters. Some estimates go up to maybe membership list for the Wisconsin Bear Hunters Association of close to 10, 7, 8. It depends over the years. I've asked Dick Thiel and others to try to get a feel how many are we even talking about. So this small number of houndsmen are having a very significant effect on wildlife policy in Wisconsin, significantly to the detriment of traditional or mainstream hunters. And that's a very interesting point, because in our lawsuit, if you don't mind me jumping ahead, there was a fabulous amicus brief filed by Wisconsin mainstream hunters, primarily deer hunters and rough grouse hunters, bow hunters, who expressed significant concern with the expansion of hound hunting in Wisconsin, this small group of folks with inordinate political sway to allow it to be expanded year-round in many respects, and how that expansion is interfering with their traditional enjoyment of their hunting, and how it is going to have economic ramifications for hunting in Wisconsin, and especially with ruffed grouse hunting and bird hunting in that regard, it poses significant danger to their dogs by packs of dogs coming upon them, and et cetera. So here we have that Wisconsin, as I saw, is in the minority of states that even allows hunting. It's a bit hard to see, but you can see that other than a scattering in the west and a butt in the northeast, primarily the hound hunting is in the south. And there's a cluster right there. The reason why this is significant is, as Jayne and others who live up north, and I assume Dave can attest to as well, is that with Wisconsin's relaxation of bear hunting requirements, with their license changes, there's an enormous influx of southern hound hunters taking up residence in northern woods starting July 1st through the summer. And they quite literally set up shop and are running their dogs, as you've heard, 24/7 in Wisconsin. So it's an important fact that there is that cluster there. But Wisconsin is in the minority, and we can look to other states to understand how they were able to either bar or limit significantly hound hunting. In looking for legal approaches or remedies to address hound hunting, there's a couple of different approaches. It appears under Wisconsin law that primarily it's moderated or regulated through administrative laws. This one is NR 17, which has to do with the training that you heard Jayne describe, which for many species can involve the entire year on non-captive animals, and of course for captive wildlife as well. And it is here where there can be opportunities to promulgate regulations that impose, for example, leash requirements, breed requirements, other care and humane standards for captive wildlife. The problem with administrative law, as Dave can speak to, being a former chair of the Natural Resources Board, is that changes to administrative code have to be recommended and put forward by the DNR, approved by a board and the legislature. It is, at its heart, a political process. So that brings us back to where we have been, but it is possible. I spent hours with Dick Thiel, who you heard from Randy was the wolf biologist before he retired, renowned nationally. And we were able to figure out, going bit by bit through NR17, how to achieve significant progress with regard to addressing many of the ethical considerations of instigating animal fighting. And how NR17 states that it is illegal to allow dogs to kill animals. We all know, as Dave has talked to, we have all heard and seen videotaped instances when hounds are used to kill the animal that they are pursuing. And there is a way to actually put meat to that, you know, to put the teeth on it to do that. Unfortunately, that has not happened currently. I could use this slide, I guess, to go a bit into our lawsuit, which we filed in 2012. This was a lawsuit that we had to figure out how the heck can we stop it. Do we challenge the statute itself, Act 169, which put forward as Wisconsin is the first state in the country to allow dogs to be used to hunt wolves? As we stated this morning, the only place in the civilized world where dogs are used in this manner. So we looked at the statute, but it didn't say for dogs to kill wolves, it said for dogs to track and trail wolves. So we had to take a risk calculation on whether or not we could challenge the statute on constitutional 14th Amendment grounds, which all that would need to be asserted is that there's a reasonable basis for track or trail, that dogs could be used to track or trail, that it made sense to use them in this fashion. And we determined that that was, would be quite risky. So the route that we took, which was not without risks, obviously, is that we went and challenged the regulatory void, the vacuum created by a statute that authorized dogs to track and trail wolves, but then had no implementing legislation. Nothing in NR 17, which is for training, and nothing in NR 10 for hunting that actually prevented interactions between wolves and dogs. And as our experts came forward, we have Patricia McConnell in the room. I'm looking right at her. People like Patricia McConnell, who is a nationally known animal behavior expert and dog trainer, et cetera, she basically stated in affidavit as evidence that without leash requirements, without breed restrictions, without a certified training program, it is inevitable that there will be dog fighting, that animal fighting will occur. Not too different than Michael Vick's, but just in the woods. So we had her testimony, we had Dick Thiel's testimony talking about the territoriality of wolves, that unlike bears, who at times can escape up trees, wolves at some point will turn and confront the dogs. They just will. That is by nature. They protect their territory. They protect their young. There is an inevitable confrontation that cannot be avoided unless there are meaningful regulations and restrictions placed into the administrative code. And of course, we had other experts as well speaking to the same concerns, including Adrian Trevis and others who spoke from their biologist position, et cetera. So what we were fortunate to achieve, it was a 1-year stay, really, in holding back on the use of dogs for training purposes and for hunting for that first year, because we did receive an order granting the stay, preventing the use of dogs to train or hunt wolves. You may have seen it in the newspaper. This is one that I dug out from my rat pack pile. It was a big deal, because it did seem to offer a glimmer of hope that our substantive claims regarding animal welfare concerns and the regulatory void that was created by the DNR's inaction or the constraints that were put on it politically to not be able to fill in the needed blanks came into being. However, unfortunately, and this is just the way it works sometimes in lawsuits, our lawsuit was never able to have the substantive information brought to the public or even brought out in court. We became completely subsumed in the procedural workings of the Department of Natural Resource Board and DNR decision-making, the discretion afforded to decision makers in what they could or could not put in rules. So just trust me when I tell you that as much as we wanted to get our experts up there to really get to the root of the problem, we could not do so. We were very much in the la-la land of what discretion is afforded those folks. So I do want to describe, though, what opportunities still do exist. As Dave talked about, that there is an important case that we used in our lawsuit as well, and if we would have been allowed to get to the substance, we would have been able to use this. And interestingly, even the Court of Appeals decision did state that there could be instances, if the facts were put forward, to show violations of animal cruelty in training and hunting dogs on wolves. But this is an important decision because I'm hoping that we can work it in. I'm hoping we can use it. I don't know how familiar folks are with this particular set of facts. It's pretty gruesome. Knowing me, I'm not going to get too into it other than it's a disturbing situation. Two brothers came across a field of deer, and for their own sick reasons, they decided to use their snowmobiles to batter the deer and do all sorts of other really bad things. You can read about it in the court decision, but just trust me, it was intentional cruelty. And the courts, of course, did describe all of that in the court opinion. And they were prosecuted. I mean, a sheriff came across this field of carnage, and they were actually prosecuted. So that's a rare thing. But it was gross. But the lower courts dismissed it because they listened and they believed and they ruled in favor of these arguments that you see behind me here. The Coonsies' arguments was that under the animal cruelty statute, which is 95.102, that couldn't be applied to their actions, no matter how cruel or senseless, because the taking of wild animals is a hunting activity solely regulated under Chapter 29. And only that chapter could regulate hunting, and they could do anything they really wanted to, any wild animal, with no fear of prosecution. Oh, and I have to move along here. But fortunately, the Court of Appeals disagreed. And I won't take you all the way through this, but it really is interesting, and I can't help be very encouraged by it. Basically, the Court of Appeals laid out a basis that while Chapter 29 does authorize pursuit, it does not authorize the protracted killing or torture of wild animals by means of dogs. And that's something that I personally gleaned from the decision, because they basically said, hey, no, you just can't do anything because there is no conflict, and we will be looking at that specific language. So here is 1704. This mentions, as I mentioned, that you can't kill or cause to be killed any free-roaming wild animal. We can use this. We have tools available. And I think we should open up to questions at this point. But we are going to show this gruesome video, which I don't know if it is gruesome, but I can't imagine it's going to be pleasant.
Why don't I take some questions while we're trying to get this going here? All right. There's one hand.
I have a question for Randy. It's a great pleasure to be able to ask an expert. People throw around numbers, and one of the things that you said in your speech was that this 350 number, you really want to get rid of this. I don't know anywhere near enough about wolves, but I want to ask, why are people using numbers describing individual animals when shouldn't we be talking about packs?
Yes.
Next question.
Play. All right, you ready, Jayne?
Yes, it's just something that, people can understand better. But when we are talking about wolves, packs would be a much better denominator, if you will, more biologically meaningful. But people aren't used to talking about wolves in the first place, let alone, packs of wolves. So back in the 1990s, when we were developing that plan, we did decide to talk about, total numbers of wolves in the state. And it also, and by doing so, it also would include the loners that we know about that are not in packs. Thank you. And Wisconsin in the 90s, there were quite a few loners. There still are, of course, but the population was increasing, and so we had a lot of dispersing individuals. Now, when we did have trackers that could locate those, we would include those in the count. So as resident packs, plus all of the dispersing wolves. So it made more sense to talk about the total population.
Okay, I guess we're ready for your horror show, Jayne.
Okay, this, in 2013 is when things changed and they added a whole bunch of different animals. And it created a market for live animals. And actually, captive coyotes sometimes can get $80 where a pelt will be only $40. And not all live bait training takes part in a captive environment.
Get 'em, guys. Good dogs. Yeah. Get 'em, Decon. Get off. Good. Get Rick. Get Elijah.
Dragging him back there, damn it.
Get him. Get him.
Down here!
Get him. Tear him up. Come on, Rex. Come on, Rex. Get him. Get him. Go on, Dakota.
Grab one of the dogs so I can shoot it.
And in 2013, for the first time in 100 years, hounds were allowed to train on wild wolves. And also that year in 2013, in a survey, the estimated 11,363 bear hounds were taken out on the landscape for training. The hounding community made this public statement that said, "Our hounds are trained not to engage." And the DNR states it's illegal to allow your hounds to kill wildlife. And is that enforced? And where do they stand on the fighting and the mauling? We can't confirm these videos were filmed in Wisconsin. We believe they were filmed in the Midwest Great Lakes. And we can confirm that animals were harmed during the filming. Hound hunting and training often takes a very dark path, and they're cloaked and defended by the protections of animal hunter rights. Isn't it time Wisconsin turned the lights on? Thank you.
Here we go. Are we ready? If 350 is the wrong number, what is the sustainable population of wolves for Wisconsin?
I think 800 would be a very good number, considering the fact that we now have a law that demands, doesn't just authorize, demands, orders a harvest season. It orders the Department of Natural Resources to have a harvest season. Given that, we have to have a population high enough to sustain at least some type of harvest. That would be, in my opinion, 800 animals.
Should we be using a number, or should we use carrying capacity, or?
Yeah, and during the cocktail hour, turn around and talk to Adrian Whitehaven about that. He'll tell you all about it. He's lobbied for a long time to get us away from numbers and into the carrying capacity and or no number, but just thresholds, okay? Less than this much damage, less than this much, cattle damage. As many as there are, but let's remove the ones that are causing damage. Let's do other factors besides total numbers.
Let's see. I think we'll end with you, Nancy.
Don't
Sorry.
worry. I just want to make one quick comment because of the disturbing video and how we can be activists. About a year and a half ago, we came across a very similar video that was recorded in Michigan, and won't name all the parties involved, but in the end, we got it into the hands of Humane Society, who worked with the Gogebic County Prosecuting Office, and we have filed charges against these guys. And just 2 weeks ago, it was up to circuit court. It went from district court to circuit court. They're bound over on felony criminal charges for allowing their dogs to kill that coyote.
And again, I think just to end on that note, I will be having a little special speaker sort of talk about the work that he's doing on the ground, recording evidence of hound hunting and non-enforcement just shortly before the movie. So make sure and stick around tonight. It'll be more fun and it'll technically work, I promise. Okay, thank you guys so much.